This is SSN.
Story Studio Network.
I'm Tom Hoppe, and I'm your host of the Most Painful Podcast. We are starting Season 3, and I'd like to thank you, the listeners from Canada, US, Europe, UK, and Australia, for your support of this show. Your feedback has helped develop the show and define the topics that are important to you, and we've received a number of responses on how the information on the show has helped people, so keep those suggestions coming. Some of the upcoming episodes for Season 3, we're going to talk about the science of yoga and can it really help with chronic pain, and that'll be with Neil Pearson from the University of British Columbia. Also, new research hot off the press comparing opioids and cannabis, and is cannabis as good as opioids, and that's with Dr. Jason Bussa. Also talking about how chronic pain is managed in the UK, and many more topics, so subscribe to the podcast and you'll be notified on the new show releases. Identity and mindset are important to define a new purpose in life, especially if someone's been injured or suffers from chronic pain. For someone who's been immersed in a directive, institutionalized culture, such as veterans and professional athletes, defining who one is and what their new purpose in life is becomes more difficult. On today's show, we'll do a deeper dive into identity and mindset and how a person can use what they've learned in their previous careers to help them transition to a new life. Joining me today is Leo Rautins, a Canadian broadcaster and a former professional basketball player, and also former head coach of the Canadian men's national team. Leo, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate it.
And also joining us, Cameron Gaunce, a professional hockey player. And Cameron, you've been on the podcast before. We talked about this subject. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So, the three of us have talked offline about identity and mindset and, the impact it can have and also how it can help people. But I thought to help the audience, maybe we can just start. We'll talk a little bit about identity and mindset and what it means to us. So, Leo, I'd like to start with you. If you were to reflect back on your journey, how did identity and mindset impact you as you moved through your career from a player to a broadcaster to where you are now?
Well, I'd have to go way back to ninth grade. I think we talked about this a little bit, that in ninth grade, believe it or not, for some reason I knew I was going to be an NBA player. As crazy as that sounds for a kid growing up in Toronto, I had no doubt in my mind that I was going to play in the NBA. I also have a horrible connection with mathematics. I don't want to, no math in my life, zero. I look at the score when it's double digits and I don't know the difference. Right? It's terrible. What I wanted to do is I actually went to my guidance counselor, who was my basketball coach, and I said, look, I'm going to play in the NBA, and I want a career that I could intertwine the two. It didn't make sense to me to say, be a professional athlete, have a profile, have a platform, whatever you want to call it, and then be in a lab somewhere in something totally unrelated. And then again, no math. So we started talking about all kinds of different things and came up with broadcast journalism. I enjoy speaking. I enjoy writing. I like all my English classes and all that kind of stuff. So it just seemed like a perfect connection. And the profile of one can benefit the other, and the experience of one benefit the other. So that plan was forged in ninth grade. And then the second part of that was the best advice I ever got was a professor my junior year at college, and he said, your degree means nothing, your resume means everything. And from that point on, even though I went on to become a professional athlete, I had a lot of injuries, unfortunately, a ton of injuries. And so what I did was I did something all the time to build a resume. Anytime I was out, I played in Italy, I wrote in the Corriere dello Sport. I did the CBC Olympics between my rookie year and my sophomore year in the NBA. Whatever I could do, I did. So when the day finally came, I couldn't play. I had a resume, and I had a pity party for myself. I had surgery. They said, you're done. I cried. I drank. The next day, I had a new job a week later in TV. So my identity kind of was forged in two ways. One, as a professional athlete, and two, the plan of what I'm going to do after. And I think I'm very fortunate because for some reason I was very positive about one, and I tried to find something to complement it, whereas a lot of athletes get into real trouble, and I see it firsthand all the time, even in my own family. I have sons. I have a son that played in the NBA, and then the next question is, what are you going to do after? And I think for a lot of athletes, that's an enormous question, and it really does impact their identity because their identity is, it's almost entirely on them being an athlete. And it becomes very difficult to take that next step or find what else can give you that same identity or same feeling or so forth.
Yeah, no, those are some very good points. And I mean, now you're out of the game, and you've talked how you made that transition. But Cameron, I mean, you're still in the game, right? So for younger players, are they aware of what identity is? Are they aware of how they've changed as a person? And are they kind of considering what they're going to do with their future when if that time comes when they have to leave the game?
When you talk about all this, like, do they notice? Do they recognize? I feel like, unfortunately, a lot of can speak to hockey players. Their emotional intelligence might not be as high, and their self-awareness might not quite be as high as maybe other facets of life. So when that ends up happening, they have a tough time kind of escaping their own world. When Leo was talking about him in grade 9, realizing he was going to be in the NBA and that's what he wanted to do, I was a bit different. Growing up, I've been watching the NHL draft these last couple days, and they're talking a lot about, like, this kid was the best player growing up, and I was probably the 4th best player in my minor hockey team growing up. I played with 3 guys who were still playing in the NHL today. I'm not even the best hockey player in my family. My younger brother plays. He was first round pick. He's been playing for a long time. So my identity didn't really form as a hockey player until I think I started playing junior hockey. And at that time, I had a tough time grasping that this is kind of now what I'm known by, was that, oh, Cameron Gaunce, the hockey player. That was hard for me to just grasp in the first place. But then once I kind of did realize that this is what it is, coming up kind of towards the tail end of my career, if it's a golf course, I'm probably teeing off on 18. It becomes hard because Leo talked about the plan he had in place, and it sounds like he did what everyone hopes to be able to accomplish in terms of staying that active. Writing in an Italian paper sounds awesome. All these things, I try to keep as many doors open as possible throughout, but Tom, we were just talking about it before we got on. If it were to happen, yes, there are avenues I can go down, but I'm nervous that I'm not going to choose the right one, or what I go to next won't be right, because, like I said, since I was 16 and even younger, I tried. All I've known is work towards being a hockey player. You wake up, this is your purpose for the day. Become better at your job. So once that gets kind of taken away, is this next job going to be my job for life? Is that what I wake up with purpose for? So that idea of mindset and identity for players, speaking from my own personal experience, it's a hard thing to kind of come to grips with when you first happens, and then transitioning out of it, I'm nervous what it's going to be like.
Yeah, and I think about that as well too. And I mean, I sucked at math too, and I did play hockey. But if you take, I played hockey at same, as a kid and a little bit in the military. But if you took the stick away, I'd probably fall over. So it's this whole thing about, jobs are lined up, and when, same thing. When I left the service, it was okay. What am I going to do in life? I'm going to go back to school, do that kind of thing. But one thing that I've kind of seen over the years, and I've seen it with, and I'm wondering if it's the same in the sports, and we see it in the veteran world, is when we talk about identity and culture, going to a job is a process, right? You just go to the job. But the mindset of the world you came from, so in the military, it's mission first, self last. Push, 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 never give up, suck it up, buttercup, all that kind of stuff, which is good. Employers look for those skills, but employers also say, these guys are different. They're just the way they talk. And then military guys are going, civilians are different. So it's military guys, we don't understand that we've changed. It's taken me a long time to understand that I'm different than I've changed, not the civilian world, right? Being on time and, all those things we've talked about offline. Is that the same in the sports world too? Like, do you find that, yes, you can go to another job, be a broadcaster or whatever, but your mindset, is it different than if you were to sit around a table with a bunch of civilians? Is it different? And is that what makes you more driven than the average person? Does that make sense? And I'm opening it up as a conversation between the three of us here. So it's not a Q&A or anything, but.
Oh yeah, I'll jump in. I think we are different, and personally, I think it's in a good way because, and again, we have that focus, and okay, let me put it this way: when I encounter in my job real professionals in what they do, they're different too, right? So you've got some broadcasters that, hey, these guys are disciplined. They perform, they do this, they preparations, this and that. So they're different than the average Joe. And I think we're different than the average Joe because that's the way we've always been taught to do. You prepare, you're ready, you're on time. Because there's repercussions for not being on time. There's repercussions for not being ready. It can be devastating. And so, I think that there's a big difference. Sometimes I get frustrated being around, say, everyday people that don't have that discipline, don't have the accountability, maybe even having entitlement that they should be given something. I think, Cameron, I'm sure you feel the same way. We don't feel like we're entitled to anything. We got to earn everything every day. And it's, in sports, it's not just what you did yesterday. It's what are you doing for me today? So there's no entitlement in that regard. I don't care how much money you make. If you stink after you just got your big contract, you're going to get destroyed. And so every day is a new day to perform and work. I don't know if you get that same vibe, Cam.
No, I couldn't agree more. Basically, all the points you just made, I couldn't agree more. Like when you talk about, yeah, we are a bit different, and hockey, like I realize I'm a bit different in the sense that, like, just knowing your two names, I want to call you by like hockey nicknames, right? Like I want to, like Rautins and Hoppe is how I would be addressing you guys, right?
Exactly.
So if I'm doing that, like for instance, when I was at the Pain conference, I can't call people by nicknames. I can't be. It needs to be Mister or Doctor this and just that right there is a mindset I need to kind of change. But when you talk about being different, it's just a learned behavior. Like for myself growing up, the learned behavior was work as hard as you possibly can at this particular task because that's how you're going to get the most out of it. And then if this were to then translate to something else, I would hope that it will be the same whatever I decide to do next. I'm going to take that same, I'm not going to leave any stone unturned. I'm going to be the hardest worker I possibly can, work as hard, if not harder than everyone else around me, and hope that translates. Leo, you just talked about how you see with broadcasters, there are some professionals that are doing every possible thing to make themselves the best they can. And though I don't have quite as much extensive knowledge and experience in different fields, the times I have, like when I went through a CBA negotiation for our union, when the other side comes to the table, you see just how prepared they all are. Like they've got the CBA known back and front. And again, that's kind of if I view it through an athlete's lens, I view it very similar in that they just want to be better than you. They want to have the upper edge on you. Just like if I'm playing hockey and I know certain players they like to use certain moves. If they're coming out of the corner, I know that they like to go to their backhand or their forehand. I know I will then counteract that. In the CBA negotiation, they want to know what you're coming with, and they're going to have just as much, if not more information to combat that. And I noticed that as long as athletes can realize that these traits that they've learned and they've practiced for years and years and years, it can work. They just need to understand that it's not the exact same.
Yeah, and to that point, I think sometimes athletes fall in the trap that our lives are very regimented. So same with military, right? So you know that at 8:00 in the morning you got to be here, at 12:00 you got to be here, and you're like, okay. I used to hate when the season ended. I hated it because, and this is going back to college. I'm playing at Syracuse University, and when the season ended, I had so much time on my hands, and like I had to go find guys to work out, wouldn't have a pickup game. I hated that, right? I always wondered how an average student ever complained about not having time because I have nothing but time now. But it drove me nuts. It drove me nuts that I had to actually go figure out how to get a bunch of guys together to play a pickup game because our lives are so regimented. So I think a lot of athletes find a lot of trouble with that when they exit, that it's not all kind of structured like that. And I'm sure, Tom, you could speak on it more than either of us can as far as the military goes.
Yeah, you're right. And there's a couple things both of you brought up that, they're good, like you said, Cameron, they're good skills to use when you're out, but it's being aware that there's going to be some differences with it. And the regimented point that you brought up, Leo, is bang on, because when you're, from the military side, when you're in a culture that basically everything's done for you in a sense, right? If you got an issue, someone will look after it, because your job in the military is to actually go, depending what job you do. So I was in the combat arms, your job's to prepare to fight. That's what your job is, right? So all the administration stuff behind that is supported for you. So once you leave the service, yes, you don't have that regimented timetable anymore. You don't have someone looking out for you anymore. You got to, find your own family doctor. And it's all done on the base. So you got to find your family doctor. And I remember when I first got out, I wanted to, we were in Kingston and I wanted to take a trip to Montreal. And I thought, oh, I got to go get permission to do that. Because normally you need a leave pass. Like it's these small little things that the average person may go, oh, that's not a big deal. But if there's a consequence behind not doing what you're supposed to do, and now you have the ability to do it, it kind of screws you up a little bit, I think, like you're kind of like, what's going on here? Am I moving?
It definitely does.
Yeah.
It definitely does.
So, that's my point. I think I've seen a number of veterans and a friend of mine, unfortunately, who, took his life because he struggled. He had good jobs, but he struggled with that transition. He came from a military family and then he was in the military and all of a sudden he's out in the real world. And he just thought, he said to me, I ran into him at the gym and he said, I thought it was like another posting, Tom, like I was being posted to another, base. And he just couldn't manage it, right? So I think this is where that gap is we have these skills, but it's some of this mindset stuff that we're not aware of, if that makes sense.
Hey, can I say, you said welcome to the real world. You know that's one of the things that drives me nuts when someone ever said that to me, because I was in a real world, my world. Yeah. That was very real to me.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
And I was doing everything in my world. And if you think my world was any easier than yours, like, again, I'll go back to college. I remember college students saying, oh, well, you're missing a class. You're going here. You're doing that. Well, that's my job is taking me out of class. My job is taking me to Pittsburgh or wherever. Your daddy's paying for your tuition, right? So when somebody told me the real world, that drove me crazy. And even though we are talking about two distinct worlds, right? No question. But that was one of my pet peeves. I go, come on, no. I have a real world,
Oh, I couldn't, again, along those same lines, like I mentioned, I grew up with 3 other guys on my minor hockey team who have all had very successful NHL careers. So everyone's perspective around me is, oh, well, what do you mean? You're a pro hockey player. Your life is, well, I haven't lived the same experience. Mine has been 13 seasons with, I think every year, there's been 27 moves. And my, again, finances are a lot different than theirs. So to hear like, well, come on, Austin Matthews is about to sign for $14 million over 5. Yeah, that's him. I'm not him. It's a very different experience. So this idea that hockey players or athletes all have the same lifestyle is crazy. I can now, over the past years, I could probably tell you most laws regarding real estate in 6 different states. I can tell you insurance policies for all those states. That, again, like you talk about real world, I've had to have lots of real world experiences that might have been singular to myself and others, but there's things that I've experienced as well, just in a different fashion.
Yeah. Right. And I think, you say that the two worlds, athlete and veterans are different, but the more I talk to the two of you and some other people, there are a lot of similarities. And I think the difference is what gives our strength between, and so now, what could we do to help people that are struggling? Because from the veteran side, and I'll give you our side, and then I'd like you guys to jump in if you can. But, there's been a lot of research on identity and culture. I can ream off names of it. There's been a lot of research on pain science. There's been a lot of research on peer support. But one of the gaps that we noticed was that this whole mindset of you can go through, and it's all good stuff, and I'll probably get some comments from people, but, taking a transition program to go get a job is one thing. Taking transition to, maybe talk about your feelings is another. But if we're not making people aware of how they're acting, military people will be out of the military, they'll be put into a situation and they'll automatically go back to acting a certain way without even knowing they did it. And if we can't make them aware of that, that is where I think the kind of the hiccup is for them to move forward. And if you look at, we're doing that with that Alpine Challenge where we're doing education on mindset and that, and then moving them forward. In the pro athlete world, from what I hear you guys say, is that the regimented, the identity, the culture, there's a lot of similarities there. And it sounds to me like, an athlete who leaves the profession will have some inherent behaviors that they may not be aware of that impact them. if that's true, what can be done for them to help them succeed? Like you, Leo, you've succeeded, right? So you've succeeded in a job, and have you succeeded in the mindset change too, understanding the differences between you and the civilian and how you can adjust, and then Cameron can jump
Yeah,
in there.
yeah. I think I think I'm comfortable in my life and surroundings I'm in, the differences. But that's where I think the important point, Tom, is that there's no shame in getting help. There's no shame in asking for help because the transition is not going to be smooth for everybody. Whether it's military or professional athlete, and there are a lot of avenues. Some of it just may be somebody helping you realize that all your skills in, say, as an athlete can be translated, can be, put towards something good. You may not realize that. You may not see all that. Like Cameron was mentioned, like his real estate and insurance experience, that could be another career, you know? Like I guarantee I could help anybody travel to Europe based on my experiences of being and living in Europe and traveling. Um, so you have all these things that you've picked up along the way that you may not even realize can really apply and help you in the real world. And there you go, real world again. That's time I said it. But in this other world, So, I think it's not. You can't feel shame. You can't feel that it's beneath you. You can't feel that it's something wrong with you by looking for help and asking for help. I think that's a real important thing.
Yeah, and when I think about civilian behavior compared to athlete behavior, for instance, if you are told to do something during a game, if it's not done immediately, there's consequences. And I have a tough time currently as an athlete when I see others around me or friends or whatever who they're told something and it doesn't happen immediately. And this idea that yeah, it's fine, it will get done is something that I struggle with. I have a few other things that I work on outside of hockey, and in all of them, when something is said to be done, it's my anticipation that okay, you were told to do it, it's going to happen immediately, and it doesn't happen, and I have a tough time kind of conceptualizing the idea that okay, that's fine, like it was told, there was no timeline, like that is one of those things that a civilian or in other jobs it might not be as urgent, whereas in sports if you're told to do something you do it, and if you don't do it someone else will. And that's been, for someone who's been kind of in and out of, well, predominantly in the American Hockey League, in the NHL, if you're not doing it, okay, well, there's some young kid that's going to do it. Maybe not quite the same, but just as well for cheaper, and they have better options down the line. So that whole thing for me is just one of those examples of a civilian behavior that I struggle with.
Yeah, and I hear you. I mean, when in the military is loyalty, honor, and duty, and getting things done, right, and the value system. And to this day, I mean, I've been out now since 2002, and I still struggle with it to this day. I have to catch myself because it drives me nuts that if you got a job to do, get it done and do it right, and also be truthful and honorable with the people you're working with, because that is how you have to be on the battlefield, right? You got to look after each other, and you got to be able to trust the person. And I would imagine it's the same in sports, right? You got to be able to trust your teammates to do it together, right? So that is what I struggle with, is this loosey goosey, and the value system of it's all about me, and I think one person said to me once, you may know something but you may not fully understand it. And I think this is where the awareness comes in, is to, okay, yeah, okay, now I see the difference between my value system and their value system. Okay, now what do I do about it? How do I bridge that? I think that's the
Yeah, I mean, you can't walk in and be the obnoxious athlete or the obnoxious
no.
ex-military guy, right? You gotta find that way of, and again, think about this. So Cameron, you go to these different teams. I go to different teams. You got to find a way to blend in. You got to find a way to fit in, right? Be a good teammate. And so there are times you're going to make concessions. There's times you're going to speak up. There are times you're going to do all kinds of things to fit. And I think you've got to apply that same, and that's a skill. It's reading the room, right? It's a skill, and I think you got to apply that, because we do get frustrated, and we just can't walk in and say, hey, no, not doing this way. we got to find a way to, but then again, there's going to be times you are going to speak up because, that there may be a better way. But I think that the ability to read the room is a skill we all develop in our other careers that can certainly be applied so that we make that transition more pleasant for everybody, not only for other people around us, but ultimately be more pleasant for us.
Yeah, the arrogant athlete act is wearing more and more thin as the days go on. And give you an example, this summer I was able to go with my wife Andrea to the the Pain Society conference that was held in Banff, when I got to watch you present, when you did an excellent job.
Oh, thanks.
When I was there, I might have said 5 words, because you go there and at first I realized how far out of my depths I was when I'm seeing these doctors around me, these esteemed members of this conference that all are there for given reasons, and I was just kind of there. And I wasn't involved in anything. So to be there and just introducing myself, hi, I'm Andrea's husband, Cameron, and it's just, again, what's my identity there and what's my place there, and realizing my place is just another guy with a name tag on. Like, just be quiet, sit there, chew with your mouth closed, and move on. And that was basically all I could do. And whenever you see this, I would love to help out when anything, like when the Chronic Pain Center of Excellence for Canadian Veterans, when you guys were about to do your presentation, I would have loved to, like, is there something I can do? Can I do this? Can I do that? No, just shut up, stay out of the way, let everyone else do their job. And again, chew with your mouth closed, because it was during a lunch. So these things I had to kind of do. But on a team, like, especially for me, I've been one of the oldest guys on the team for the past probably 4 or 5 years, and I've been 20 going on 40, not only with my hair but with everything else. So I've kind of had to have that role, and sometimes it involved stepping up, like being more vocal or helping a player when they need to. So when I'm put in an environment where that's not needed, like, you are not supposed to be doing much, if anything, it was a hard thing for me to kind of do. So it's something I just need to continue to learn, is there's different environments for different people, and I need to kind of be the best I can in each one.
One of the things that I've always tried to do is I'm about the team. So I'm a firm believer that, say we go on a set, there's 3 or 4 of us. If one of us sucks, we all suck. If one of us shits the bed, we all do, because you got to, we're all together, right? So people are not going to remember, if one of us sounds terrible, they're going to remember that more than everybody sounding, whatever they said individually. So I've always been, as an athlete, I've always tried to make my teams better. So what I'll do is I'll see things that happen on a set, and the first thing I've done, for example, I've seen people do some things, and I'll preface it by saying, hey, look, it's actually a great story that I know. There's a professional coach who's a great guy in the NBA. His name is Hubie Brown. He's a great broadcaster as well. And Hubie Brown came when we started doing NBA in Canada. NBA Entertainment brought in all these people, and Hubie spoke to us. And Hubie said, here's what you got to do. You got to find somebody you trust, somebody that knows the business a little bit, understands how you talk. We'll come up to you and say, hey, you look like crap. Hey, you sound good. That made no sense. Whatever it may be, somebody you can trust, because here's what's going to happen. You're going to do a game, you're going to hear great job. You're going to do a game, great job. You're going to do a game, great job. And one day somebody's going to say you're fired. And you're going to realize there's nothing in between. And guess what? For 27 years, I heard great game, great game. I'm not exaggerating. I had one producer in all those years that took a little bit of time to try to help. All right. Everybody else just did their job. So you could be sitting there with your collar hanging out on TV and nobody says a word. And here's the crazy part. You got a guy sitting there to make sure your collar's tucked in. You got a producer, director, all these people. You got a guy you're sitting with, that you're working with. So I've always tried to say, I preface what I'm saying to somebody. I tell the Hubie Brown story, and I said, look, I just want to help. I noticed this, right? And because I can't, even there's some people I haven't liked at all. And it bothers me more that they're struggling and they're doing something that may hurt their career than me putting my pride aside and trying to help them, right? And I think that comes from being an athlete. that I want to, one, I want our team to be successful. Two, I want you to be successful. I want to help. So I think that's something that came from my basketball career and coaching career that I try to apply in a very subtle, polite, not I know it all type of way to help the people around me.
Yeah, and I think that's part of being a leader and part of being a team that helps out with the guys. So we're running out of time. I think we could talk for a very long time, and next time we'll have to bring some beer to the conversation. But no, it's been good, and I know what you mean, Cameron, too. When you go to these conferences, I feel the same way. You want to jump in and know when to help and how to help, and I think it's just learning when to do that, and it's easy to do when we're on a team to do that. So, would you agree that, I guess, from what I'm hearing from everybody here, is one, just be aware of the changes that a person's gone through and how to apply it? Is that kind of a big takeaway for people that are listening?
Yeah, I think introspection needs to be a much bigger part of athletics, realizing kind of who you are, what changes you've gone through, and how it might affect you moving forward. I think too often you're so focused on the task at hand that you kind of forget about some of these things. And I think doing some self-realization is really important.
And what's seeking out, when you say, sometimes you talk about professional help, but when you can seek out, Cameron, a bunch of guys that have transitioned from the hockey world to the other world, business world, corporate world. I know a lot of people. And I find that when you approach people and say, hey, like I got a buddy in real estate. Hey, can we talk? Can you help me out? They're more than willing to. And so it's not just like, getting a psychiatrist, a therapist or somebody like that. It's sometimes just reach out to people that you have access to, because we do have access to a lot of people based on, our careers. And I find that they're more than willing to share, their success stories, the little things that, it's like I always say that, if I can help you get from point A to B in a straight line, as opposed to going in a circuitous route like I had to take and many people have to take, if you could share that information, I think it's actually a thrill. It's actually a cool thing to be able to do. And I think we can all seek out people like that I think would be willing to help and to take advantage of that.
Yeah, and I think that just ties into the whole leadership thing of helping our teams and our buddies. And I feel the same way. If we can help a vet understand mindset, and that's going to make their transition better, so they're not struggling because it impacts their families, then I think that's a helpful thing. So I'd like to thank the both of you for being on the show. I think this will be helpful for people. And, Leo, your insight's been helpful because you've done that whole journey. And Cameron, you're kind of coming, I don't know where you're at. You're still in the game, I guess, eh? And then
Yep.
Still in the game. So you
stay in the game as long as you can, brother. Stay in there as long as
you
you
can. We
can.
were just talking about that. We were just talking about that.
I played till my wheels fell off.
We were just talking about that.
Yeah.
Well, I'm probably going to have to be dragged out kicking and screaming.
I tried to tell my son that. He retired. I said, don't.
Well, thanks for Cameron and Leo for being on the show.
My pleasure, Tom. Thank you. Pleasure, Cameron.
Thank you very much, both of you.
All right, so the next, and thanks to everybody for listening. Our next show is going to be on the science of yoga and chronic pain. For feedback about the show or more information on chronic pain, you can visit our website at veteranschronicpain.ca or follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Chronic Pain COE and on Instagram at chronicpain_COE. Thank you, and keep the hope alive.
The Most Painful Podcast
is produced for the Chronic Pain Center of Excellence by Story Studio Network and Eye Contact Productions.